The ballroom shimmered with elegance, its golden chandeliers casting a warm glow over the room as glasses of champagne clinked in celebration. Guests buzzed with excitement, sharing stories of the couple who seemed to embody perfection. William Grant, at 64, stood tall and confident, his silver hair neatly combed, his custom tuxedo a testament to his timeless style. A real estate mogul revered across Texas, William had built not just skyscrapers, but a legacy of influence and respect. Beside him, Felicia Taylor, the 35-year-old bride, was the picture of beauty and grace. Her ivory gown flowed like a dream, her smile radiant enough to brighten the grandest of halls. The guests were enchanted by her charm and warmth, marveling at the fairy tale unfolding before their eyes. The couple swayed gently to their first dance, and for a moment, everything in the world felt perfect. Amid the festivities, William's voice carried through the room as he addressed the guests with heartfelt gratitude. To everyone here tonight, thank you for joining Felicia and me on this special day. Life has given me many blessings, but none quite as unexpected and wonderful as finding someone who believes in love as deeply as I do. The room erupted in applause, and Felicia's eyes glistened with what could have been emotion. She rested her hand lightly on William's arm, looking up at him with admiration that seemed almost too perfect. "William," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the laughter and clinking glasses. William smiled, his eyes sparkling with the joy of a man who believed he had found the missing piece of his life. He turned to his longtime friend, Michael, who raised his glass for a toast. "To William and Felicia," Michael declared. "May your days be filled with happiness and your love unbreakable." As the crowd cheered and the music swelled, William glanced at his bride with an expression of pure devotion. He couldn't help but feel that the universe had finally given him a chance at happiness. A chance he didn't want to let slip away. The night carried on with laughter, dancing, and endless photographs capturing a storybook wedding. Yet, as the festivities wound down, William's voice could be heard in quiet conversation with a guest. "You know, I've spent years building my business, chasing success, but all of it feels small compared to what I feel standing next to Felicia." His words, spoken with conviction, drew nods and smiles from those around him. To everyone present, William seemed to be a man who had finally found his heart's desire. Felicia, too, was the center of attention, her laughter mingling the celebratory hum of the room. She spoke passionately about her non-profit work, weaving stories of her commitment to helping others. "William has inspired me to dream even bigger," she said to a small group of admirers. "Together, we're going to make a difference in ways I never thought possible." As the newlyweds prepared to leave, the guests showered them with well wishes. "You've got a gem there, William," one guest remarked. "Hold on to her tightly." William smiled broadly, his voice steady and full of hope. "I intend to." For everyone in attendance, it was a night to remember, a love story that seemed destined to inspire. But as the doors to their car closed and the couple departed into the night, the atmosphere shifted ever so slightly. For all the joy and celebration, there was an unspoken question in the air, a question no one dared to voice aloud. The story was just beginning. Before we continue this gripping tale, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support means the world to us and allows us to bring you more stories like this one. Subscribe now so you don't miss out on the unfolding drama and the powerful lessons it holds. Thank you for being part of our community. Now, let's dive back into the story. As the newlyweds' car disappeared into the Texas night, the echoes of the celebration faded into a quieter, more introspective tone. In the dim light of the limousine's interior, William's thoughts turned from the revelry to the broader arc of his life. The city lights blurred past, each one a fleeting reminder of the years he'd poured into building his empire. William Grant wasn't just known for his towering buildings or his shrewd business acumen. He was also known for the solitude that marked his personal life. Decades of relentless pursuit of professional success had come at a steep personal cost. A long-standing divorce that had left him more isolated than victorious. His marriage, once the cornerstone of his personal life, had crumbled under the weight of unmet expectations and the relentless pressures of business. The divorce had been more than just a legal separation. It had been a departure from the life he had envisioned. His ex-wife had moved to the East Coast, taking with her not just a piece of William's heart, but also their 2 children, who now, as adults, had their own lives, distant and disconnected from the world he inhabited. The occasional phone calls and holiday visits did little to bridge the gap that had widened over the years. He could never really bring faith to face with his former twins, and the move to save his life had disorganized the family. The estrangement from his children was a wound that no amount of financial success could heal. In his quieter moments, William often pondered over what his legacy would be. He had built skylines, yes, but the relationships that should have held those achievements together were as fragile as glass. He found himself attending charity galas and business functions not out of interest, but out of a need to fill the quiet hours that his successes had bought him. Yet, in meeting Felicia Taylor, William felt a spark of something that had long been missing. Hope. Felicia, with her vibrant energy and her passionate dedication to social causes, seemed to understand the parts of him that had been overlooked by others. She listened intently to the stories of his early struggles and his triumphs, with a gleam in her eye that made him believe she truly cared. She didn't just see the businessman. She saw the man he had always wanted to be. Felicia? Felicia turned to him with a smile that seemed to light up the dim interior of the limousine. William, I feel the same. To think that not so long ago we were strangers, and now, look at us. William's heart felt heavy with emotion, a mix of joy and an undercurrent of anxiety he couldn't quite place. I've spent so many years building things from the ground up, Felicia, but what I've always wanted, more than buildings, more than contracts, was a partner who really understood me. Someone to share it all with. Felicia took his hand, her touch gentle. I understand, William. I know it hasn't been easy for you. But you're not alone anymore. We're going to build something great together, something beyond just steel and glass. As the car turned onto the highway, leading them towards their new life together, William felt a sense of completeness. The loneliness that had been his constant companion seemed to recede into the background, replaced by the warmth of Felicia's presence. But deep down, a part of him remained alert, a silent observer wary of the too-perfect scenario unfolding around. His business instincts, honed over years of negotiations and deals, knew that every investment came with its risks, every contract had its clauses, and every partnership its tests. The road stretched out before them, lined with the promise of new beginnings. William looked out at the city he had helped shape, the skyline a testament to his life's work. He wanted to believe in this second chance at happiness, to embrace it fully without reservation. Yet the quiet observer in him waited, watched, and wondered, aware that even the most beautiful facades could hide complex truths. It had been an uncharacteristically cool afternoon in Texas, the kind of day that made even the busiest of people stop and savor the crisp air and clear skies. William Grant found himself sitting alone on a wrought-iron bench in the middle of McKinley Park, his mind heavy with thoughts of the life he'd built and the life he'd somehow lost along the way. As he gazed out at a small pond where ducks floated lazily, he barely noticed the gust of wind that sent a flurry of papers scattering across the park pathway. A woman nearby gave a startled yelp, clutching at the sheaf of documents that threatened to escape her grasp. Without thinking, William stood and moved toward her, bending down to catch a wayward page before it was carried off by the breeze. "Oh, thank you so much," the woman said, her voice carrying a warmth that instantly caught his attention. She straightened, taking the papers from him with an expression of relief. "It's no trouble at all," William replied, brushing a speck of dirt off one of the pages before handing it back. As he looked up, he found himself momentarily speechless. Standing before him was a woman in her mid-30s, with radiant brown skin and eyes that seemed to hold a world of stories. She was dressed in a smart yet casual outfit, a tailored blazer over a fitted blouse, that gave her an air of both sophistication and approachability. Her hair was styled in sleek waves that framed her face, and she smiled at him with genuine gratitude. "Felicia Taylor," she said, extending a hand. "And you just saved me from losing some very important documents." William took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "William Grant, it's a pleasure to meet you, Felicia." She tilted her head, her smile widening slightly. "William Grant, as in the William Grant, the real estate developer?" He chuckled softly, surprised by the recognition. "Guilty as charged, though I usually try to keep a low profile in parks." Felicia laughed, a light, musical sound that seemed to brighten the overcast day. "Well, I've heard about your work. It's hard not to, living in Texas. Your developments are practically landmarks." William shrugged modestly, though he couldn't help the flicker of pride that accompanied her words. "Thank you. I've been fortunate to do what I love for a living. And what about you? Those documents look important." Felicia's expression shifted to one of earnest enthusiasm. "They are. I run a non-profit organization focused on affordable housing. We're working to secure funding for several projects aimed at providing safe, accessible homes for low-impact families." William's interest piqued, and he leaned in slightly. "Affordable housing? That's an area I've always thought about exploring, though most of my work has been in commercial and luxury properties." Felicia's eyes lit up and she clasped her hands together. "That's incredible! We've been trying to get meetings with developers for months, but it's a tough sell. Everyone seems more interested in maximizing profits than in addressing the housing crisis." For the first time in years, William felt a spark of excitement beyond the confines of his business. He saw in Felicia not just passion, but a vision that resonated with his own unspoken desire to leave a lasting, meaningful impact. "Why don't we discuss this over coffee sometime?" William offered, the words escaping before he could overthink them. "I'd love to hear more about what you're working on." Felicia hesitated for the briefest of moments before nodding. "I'd like that, Mr. Grant." "William," he corrected with a smile. "Just William." They exchanged numbers, and as Felicia walked away, her papers now safely secured in her arms, William couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. For the first time in a long while, he felt an unexplainable lightness in his chest, a stirring of something he couldn't quite name. Later that evening, as he sat in his sprawling yet eerily quiet penthouse, William replayed the encounter in his mind. Felicia Taylor. Her name alone seemed to linger like a melody. He found himself smiling at the thought of her, her passion, and the way her laughter had felt so genuine. Across town, in a modest apartment, Felicia stared at her phone, her lips curling into a slow smile as she glanced at the contact she had just saved, William Grant. Her eyes glinted with a determination that belied the casual charm she had exuded in the park. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her nails thoughtfully against the armrest. For William, this was the beginning of what he believed could be a meaningful connection, perhaps even a chance to fill the void he had felt for so long. For Felicia, it was the first move in a game that she intended to play with precision and patience. In the weeks that followed their first meeting, Felicia Taylor and William Grant became inseparable. Their connection seemed natural, almost effortless, as if they had been destined to find each other. Felicia's charm was magnetic, her laughter infectious, and her passion for affordable housing initiatives appeared to resonate deeply with William's latent desire to make a difference beyond the world of high-end real estate. To William, Felicia embodied everything he had been missing in his life. Youthful energy, a sense of purpose, and a kind of moral clarity that inspired him to reevaluate his priorities. They dined at upscale restaurants, attended art galleries, and spent evenings talking late into the night about their shared goals. Felicia listened intently to his stories of building an empire and dreams of leaving a legacy. In return, she painted vivid pictures of her non-profit's mission, weaving tales of families whose lives had been transformed through her efforts. "William," she said one evening as they strolled through a moonlit garden, her hand lightly brushing his arm, "you've already done so much for this world. Imagine what we could do together. With your resources and connections, we could change the lives of thousands." Her words struck a chord deep within him. For the first time in years, he felt not just seen, but truly valued for more than his wealth and influence. "I've always wanted to do more," he confessed, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "But I didn't know where to start. You've given me that direction, Felicia." Behind her radiant smile, Felicia's mind worked methodically. She had studied William carefully, learning what made him tick, what moved him, and, most importantly, what weaknesses she could exploit. Every story she told about her non-profit was carefully crafted, each anecdote designed to tug at his heartstrings and open his wallet. Her passion seemed genuine, her tears heartfelt, but beneath the surface, every word was calculated. The donations started small, a few $1,000s here and there to support a fundraiser or awareness campaign. But as their relationship deepened, so did William's generosity. Felicia skillfully steered their conversations toward larger investments, subtly planting the idea that his support could bring about monumental change. One afternoon, as they sat in his expansive penthouse overlooking the city, Felicia handed him a glossy brochure. "This is our most ambitious project yet," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "We want to build a housing complex for low-income families right here in Texas. It's a massive undertaking. But with your help, I know we can make it happen." William flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the detailed renderings and carefully constructed narratives. "This is incredible," he said, genuinely impressed. "What do you need from me?" Felicia reached for his hand, her touch soft but firm. "I would never ask for more than you're comfortable giving, William, but if you could connect me with your network of investors, or even contribute a small amount yourself, it would mean the world." Moved by her apparent selflessness, William didn't hesitate. "Consider it done," he said, his voice brimming with determination. "Whatever you need, Felicia, I'm all in." What William didn't realize was that every penny he donated was being funneled into accounts that Felicia controlled. The non-profit he admired so much was little more than a facade, its glossy brochures and heartfelt stories fabricated to sustain an illusion of legitimacy. Felicia had spent years perfecting this act, and now, with William's wealth at her fingertips, her plan was unfolding exactly as she had envisioned. As their relationship blossomed, Felicia played her role to perfection. She listened with rapt attention when he spoke about his business ventures, laughed at his jokes, and encouraged him to think of new ways to merge their goals. She peppered their conversations with compliments, making him feel like the most important man in the world. "You've inspired me, William," she said one evening as they watched the sunset from his balcony. "I've never met anyone who cares as deeply as you do. Together, we're unstoppable." Her words filled him with pride and a renewed sense of purpose. Yet, while William's love grew stronger with each passing day, Felicia's focus remained unwaveringly on her goal. Every gesture of affection, every tear shed during heartfelt conversations was a calculated move to solidify his trust. Behind closed doors, Felicia meticulously tracked William's finances. She memorized his business dealings, studied his habits, and even learned the names of key players in his network. Her research was thorough, her approach strategic. To William, she was a partner, a kindred spirit who shared his dreams. To Felicia, he was an opportunity, a means to an end. By the time Felicia casually mentioned that her apartment lease was expiring, William was already so deeply enamored that he didn't hesitate to invite her to move into his home. "You shouldn't have to worry about a lease," he said, taking her hand. "Stay here with me. This place has been too empty for too long." Felicia's face lit up with what appeared to be surprise, but inside she was already congratulating herself. "Are you sure, William?" she asked, her tone laced with hesitation. "That's such a big step." "I've never been more sure of anything," he said, pulling her into his arms. "I love you, Felicia. I want to build a life with you." As she nestled into his embrace, a triumphant smile flickered across her lips, hidden from his view. William's trust was complete, his guard down, and she was exactly where she needed to be. The next phase of her plan was about to begin. Not everyone in William's life shared his enthusiasm for his newfound love. From the outside, Felicia Taylor appeared flawless, a woman of beauty, charm and ambition. But to those who knew William best, something about her felt too good to be true. Michael, William's best friend and business partner for over 3 decades, had watched the whirlwind romance with growing unease. They had built their empire together, and Michael knew William better than most. He had seen him weather storms, make impossible deals, and recover from crushing losses. But this time, Michael feared, his friend's heart was leading him into uncharted, dangerous territory. "William, can we talk?" Michael said one afternoon as they reviewed a set of blueprints in William's office. The sprawling room, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Texas skyline, was a testament to their shared success. "Of course," William replied, setting down his pen. "What's on your mind?" Michael hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It's about Felicia. You've only known her a few months and things are moving awfully fast. Don't you think you should slow down, take some time to really get to know her?" William's expression shifted, a mix of annoyance and confusion. "Michael, I appreciate your concern, but Felicia isn't some stranger. She's the best thing that's happened to me in years. She's genuine, passionate, and she loves me." Michael leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed. "I'm not saying she doesn't seem wonderful, William, but you have to admit it's all a bit sudden. Have you looked into her background? Do you know anything about her past?" "She's told me everything I need to know," William said firmly. "She's dedicated her life to helping others. I've never met someone so selfless." Michael didn't press further, knowing his friend's mind was made up, but the knot in his stomach remained, tightening with each passing day. Meanwhile, Charlotte, William's daughter, had flown in from California as soon as she heard the news of her father's engagement. Though their relationship had been distant in recent years, she loved her father deeply and couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was amiss. "Dad, can we talk?" Charlotte asked during dinner at his favorite steakhouse. Her tone was cautious, but her eyes betrayed her concern. William set down his fork and looked at her, puzzled. "What's on your mind, Charlotte?" "It's about Felicia," she said, folding her hands on the table. "I know you're happy, and that's all I want for you. But don't you think this is all happening a little too quickly? You've only known her a short time, and now you're talking about merging your lives completely." William sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "Charlotte, I understand your concerns, but you don't know Felicia like I do. She's not interested in my money or my business. She's a good person who wants to make the world a better place." Charlotte bit her lip, struggling to find the right words. "I just want you to be careful, Dad. You've worked so hard for everything you have. You need to protect yourself." His face hardened, a rare expression for the usually composed William. "I don't need to protect myself from Felicia. She's not like that." "Okay," Charlotte said softly, retreating. "But if anything doesn't feel right, promise me you'll listen to your instinct." William nodded, though his mind was already elsewhere, focused on the life he was building with Felicia. Both Michael and Charlotte noticed the same unsettling details during their interactions with Felicia. She was polite, even warm, but there was a guarded quality about her, as though every word and gesture had been rehearsed. When asked about her past, she offered vague answers, steering the conversation back to her non-profit work or her future with William. She seemed to avoid deeper topics, always deflecting with charm and poise. At the engagement party, Charlotte found herself watching Felicia from a distance. Her father's fiancée moved through the room with practiced ease, engaging guests with just the right amount of attention and warmth. But Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling that Felicia's smile never quite reached her eyes. Later, she voiced her concerns to Michael in a quiet corner of the room. "Something about her feels off," Charlotte said, glancing at her father, who was laughing at one of Felicia's stories. "I can't put my finger on it, but I don't trust her." Michael nodded, his own unease mirrored in her words. "I feel the same way. But you know your dad. Once he's made up his mind, it's nearly impossible to change it." "Then we have to watch out for him," Charlotte said, her voice resolute. "If she's not who she says she is, we'll figure it out." As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Felicia stood by William's side, her arm looped through his. To everyone else, they looked like the perfect couple. But for Michael and Charlotte, the doubts lingered, a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface. They didn't know what Felicia's intentions were, but they were determined to protect the man they loved, no matter the cost. The day of the wedding dawned bright and warm, a picture-perfect Texas morning. The ceremony was set to take place in the grand ballroom of the Lone Star Resort, a venue renowned for its opulence and elegance. Cascading white roses lined the aisle, and gold accents adorned every table and chair. It was a wedding befitting the stature of William Grant, a man whose name was synonymous with success and sophistication. Guests arrived in droves, a mix of business moguls, society elites, and close friends. The air buzzed with excitement and whispered admiration for the couple. William, dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, stood at the altar with a confident smile. His presence commanded the room, as it always did, but today there was an undeniable softness in his demeanor, a joy that hadn't been there in years. The double doors of the ballroom swung open, and Felicia entered on the arm of her uncle, her gown a masterpiece of delicate lace and flowing silk. A collective gasp rippled through the audience as she began her walk down the aisle. She looked every bit the blushing bride, her face framed by a veil that added an air of mystery. But for those paying closer attention, there were subtle cracks in the illusion. One, Felicia's steps, though steady, carried a slight hesitation, as if her mind was elsewhere. Her eyes flickered across the room, not with awe or emotion, but with a searching quality, darting to the exits and scanning the faces in the crowd. She gripped her bouquet tightly, her knuckles pale against the vibrant blooms. William, oblivious to these details, couldn't take his eyes off her. To him, Felicia was perfection incarnate, a vision of beauty and promise. As she reached the altar and placed her hand in his smile widened, a testament to the love he believed they shared. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. The officiant spoke eloquently of love and commitment, and the couple exchanged vows they had written themselves. William's voice trembled with emotion as he spoke of finding Felicia at a time when he thought his heart had no more room for hope. "Felicia," he said, his voice thick with sincerity, "you've brought light back into my life. I promise to love and cherish you for all my days." Felicia's response was equally moving, but her words carried a subtle duality, their meaning ambiguous to all but herself. "William," she began, her voice soft but steady, "you've given me a reason to believe in dreams again. I vow to honor and protect what we have, for as long as we have." To the guests, it was a declaration of love. To Felicia, it was an affirmation of her own agenda. As the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, William leaned in to kiss her, and the room erupted in applause. Crystal champagne glasses clinked, and cheers filled the air. Felicia smiled for the cameras, her posture impeccable, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of something far more complex. Relief mixed with calculation. At the reception, the atmosphere was jubilant. Guests danced, laughed, and toasted to the happy couple. Felicia moved through the crowd effortlessly, engaging everyone with charm and poise. But for those who knew her less superficially, there were subtle inconsistencies in her demeanor. Michael watched her closely from across the room. He noticed the way her gaze would linger on the exits, her expression fleetingly tense, before she returned to her polished smile. When she thought no one was looking, she seemed distracted, her fingers drumming lightly against her glass, or her eyes scanning the room, as though she were plotting her next move. Charlotte, seated at a nearby table, observed something similar. During a photo session, Felicia had stiffened visibly when William placed his arm around her waist, the gesture too intimate for her liking. It was subtle, barely perceptible to most, But to Charlotte, it felt like another crack in the facade. As the night wore on, William remained blissfully unaware of the undercurrents swirling around him. He was too busy basking in the glow of what he believed to be the start of a new and exciting chapter in his life. He laughed with guests, toasted to his future with Felicia, and danced with a youthful energy that had long been dormant. In a quieter moment, Michael pulled Charlotte aside. "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" he asked, his voice low. Charlotte nodded, her expression grim. Michael's jaw tightened. "Something's not right. I've known William for 30 years, and I've never seen him so blind. She's got him wrapped around her finger." Charlotte sighed, glancing toward her father, who was now deep in conversation with an old colleague. "We have to keep an eye on her. If she's hiding something, we'll find out." Unaware of their suspicions, Felicia continued to play her part flawlessly. She laughed at jokes, posed for countless photographs, and accepted compliments with grace. Yet, as the reception drew to a close and the newlyweds prepared to retreat to their suite, she allowed herself a fleeting moment of relief. The ceremony was over, the spotlight had dimmed, and the next phase of her plan was about to begin. As she stepped into the elevator with William, Felicia's polished smile returned. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, and whispered, "It's been a perfect day." William wrapped his arm around her, his expression one of pure contentment. "It's only the beginning," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I can't wait to see what the future holds." Felicia closed her eyes, a shadow passing briefly over her face. "Neither can I," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. The honeymoon suite at the Lone Star Resort was nothing short of a masterpiece. A luxurious haven perched high above the city with panoramic views of the sprawling Texas skyline. The room was adorned with delicate arrangements of white roses, flickering candlelight, and a king-size bed draped in fine linen. It was the epitome of romance, a setting meticulously curated for the newlyweds. William, flushed with the excitement of the day and the champagne that had flowed freely at the reception, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city below. "Felicia," he said, his voice filled with wonder, "this is everything I could have dreamed of. You've made me the happiest man alive." Behind him, Felicia busied herself at the minibar, her hands moving with steady precision as she prepared 2 glasses of champagne. She smiled, a soft, almost demure expression that masked the cold calculation in her mind. "You deserve all of this, William," she replied sweetly. "And so much more." As she spoke, Felicia reached into her clutch, her fingers deftly retrieving a small vial of clear liquid. The substance inside was undetectable, odorless, tasteless, and potent enough to sedate even a man of William's size. It had been procured weeks earlier through a series of discreet and questionable channels, a critical element of the plan she had meticulously crafted. "Here we are," Felicia said, her voice light as she approached him with the champagne flutes. She handed one to William, the faintest tremor in her hand betraying the high stakes of the moment. "To us," William said, raising his glass in a toast. His eyes were filled with trust and adoration as he clinked his glass against hers. "To us," Felicia echoed, her smile never faltering. William took a long sip, savouring the crisp bubbles that danced on his tongue. Felicia watched closely, her own glass untouched, as he drained the contents with ease. "You know," he said, setting the glass down on a nearby table, "I never thought I'd find happiness like this again." Felicia stepped closer, resting a hand lightly on his chest. "You don't have to worry about that anymore, William. I'm here now." Within minutes, the effects of the sedative began to take hold. William swayed slightly, a frown creasing his brow. "I feel strange," he muttered, his voice slurring. "Must have had too much champagne." Felicia caught him as he stumbled, her movements quick and steady. "Oh, darling," she said, feigning concern. "You've had a long day. Come, let me help you to bed." Guiding him to the massive bed, she eased him onto the mattress, her touch gentle but efficient. William's protests grew weaker, his eyes heavy-lidded as the sedative pulled him into unconsciousness. As he finally succumbed, Felicia stood over him, her expression unreadable. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the city below. She stared at William's prone form, a man who had given her everything he had, his trust, his wealth, his love. She turned away, moving toward her suitcase. Unzipping it carefully, she retrieved a small black leather case. Inside, an array of gleaming tools lay neatly arranged on a bed of velvet, each one meticulously chosen for the task at hand. Felicia placed the case on the bedside table and snapped on a pair of latex gloves. Her movements were calm and deliberate, her mind singularly focused. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the culmination of months of planning and deception. She glanced at William, his breathing deep and even, his face serene in sleep. For a fleeting moment, a shadow of hesitation crossed her face, as though the enormity of her actions was beginning to weigh on her. But the moment passed as quickly as it came, replaced by the hardened resolve that had driven her to this point. "It's nothing personal, William," she murmured under her breath, her voice devoid of emotion. "Just business." With clinical precision, she began her work, the tools in her hands moving steadily as the night stretched on. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the room, a stark contrast to the stillness of the man who had so willingly fallen into her trap. Time seemed to stand still as Felicia carried out her grim task, her mind racing with thoughts of the life that awaited her once this was over. The wealth she would inherit, the sympathy she would garner as a grieving widow. It was all within her grasp. As the clock ticked past midnight, Felicia paused to wipe her brow, her gloves smeared with crimson. She glanced at the door, her ears straining for any sound that might signal an interruption. Satisfied that she was alone, she continued, her focus unwavering. By the time the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, Felicia had finished. She stepped back, surveying her work with a mix of relief and satisfaction. The room was meticulously cleaned, every trace of her actions carefully erased. William lay motionless, his fate sealed by the woman he had believed was his second chance at love. Felicia changed into a fresh outfit, her demeanor calm and composed. She collected her belongings, taking care to leave behind no evidence that could tie her to the scene. As she prepared to leave, she allowed herself one final glance at William. "Thank you, William," she said softly, a faint smile playing on her lips, "for everything." With that, she slipped out of the room, disappearing into the early morning light, leaving behind only questions and a trail of destruction that would soon unravel. The room was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the air conditioning and the slow, rhythmic breathing of William as he lay motionless on the bed. Felicia stood over him, her gaze fixed, her lips pressed into a thin line. The black leather case sat open on the bedside table, its contents gleaming ominously under the soft, ambient light. She hesitated for the briefest of moments, the weight of what she was about to do pressing down on her chest. But she quickly pushed the doubt aside. This was no time for second thoughts. Months of planning had led her here, and the stakes were far too high to falter now. With gloved hands, she selected a scalpel from the array of tools, its sharp edge catching the light. She had practiced for this moment countless times. On medical dummies, on raw meat, even watching online tutorials to ensure she left no room for error. Her movements were steady, clinical, devoid of hesitation. Felicia began her work, each incision precise and deliberate. Her goal was not only to incapacitate William, but to send a message, a calculated act that would render him powerless, both physically and emotionally. She wanted control, and this was her way of ensuring it. As she worked, her mind remained coldly analytical. She had considered every detail, from the angle of the cuts to the tools required to minimize traceable evidence. She had even accounted for William's medical history, ensuring that her actions would appear to any investigator as the work of a deranged outsider rather than the calculated assault of a wife. The room, once a sanctuary of luxury and romance, now bore witness to an act of chilling brutality. The ivory sheets, once pristine, were now stained with crimson. The faint scent of antiseptic mingled with the metallic tang of blood, a stark contrast to the roses that adorned the room. Felicia paused briefly to assess her progress, her expression impassive. William remained unconscious, his face pale and serene, a stark juxtaposition to the violence being enacted upon him. She wiped her brow with the back of her gloved hand, her focus unwavering. "You never saw this coming, did you, William?" she muttered under her breath, her voice low and emotionless. "You trusted me completely." The weight of her words hung in the air as she resumed her grim task. Each cut, each movement of the blade was a step closer to ensuring her dominance over the life she had infiltrated. To her, William was no longer a person, but an obstacle to be dismantled, a means to an end. As the hours wore on, the scene grew increasingly macabre. Felicia worked with the precision of a surgeon, her hands steady despite the gruesome nature of her actions. She had prepared for this moment meticulously, and it showed in the efficiency with which she carried out her plan. When she finally finished, she stepped back, surveying the results of her work. William lay lifelessly, his body a canvas of calculated damage. She removed her gloves carefully, discarding them into a plastic bag along with the other tools she had used. Every detail had been accounted for, every precaution had been taken. Felicia cleaned the room with meticulous care, wiping down surfaces, disposing of any evidence that might link her to the scene. She even took the time to arrange the room as if nothing unusual had happened, leaving behind only a faint trace of the horror that had unfolded. As she gathered her belongings, she glanced back at William one last time. There was no remorse in her eyes, no flicker of humanity. To her, he was simply collateral damage, a stepping stone on her path to wealth and power. With her suitcase in hand, Felicia walked to the door, pausing for a brief moment before turning the handle. "Goodbye, William," she said softly, her voice devoid of emotion. "This was always going to end this way." And with that she stepped out into the corridor, disappearing into the early morning light. As Felicia meticulously wiped the last traces of her actions from the room, a sudden knock at the door shattered the silence. Her breath caught, her heart hammering in her chest. For a brief moment she froze, her mind racing. Who could it be at this hour? She hadn't ordered room service, and it was far too late for housekeeping. Another knock followed, louder this time. "Room service!" a muffled voice called from the other side of the door. Felicia's pulse quickened. She hadn't accounted for this. Every detail of her plan had been carefully orchestrated, but this unexpected interruption threatened to unravel everything. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. Panic would only make her more likely to make a mistake. Carefully, she stepped toward the door, smoothing her expression into one of mild irritation. Pitching her voice to sound drowsy, she called out, "I'm sorry, but we didn't order anything. You must have the wrong room." There was a pause, and for a moment she thought the danger had passed, but the voice returned, more insistent this time. "My apologies, ma'am, but I have an order for this room. Perhaps there was a mistake?" Felicia clenched her jaw, her mind working furiously. She couldn't risk letting anyone inside, not with William lying unconscious on the bed, the evidence of her actions still fresh despite her efforts to clean. She glanced at her watch. Time was slipping away faster than she'd anticipated. Summoning a strained but polite tone, she replied, "We're fine, thank you. Please just leave it outside." There was another pause, longer this time. Her fingers itched to reach for the door handle and lock it, but that might only raise more suspicion. She strained to hear the footsteps retreating, but heard nothing. The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive. Felicia moved swiftly now, her earlier precision giving way to a sense of urgency. She double-checked the room, ensuring she hadn't left behind any obvious traces. The surgical tools were carefully sealed in a disposable bag, which she stashed at the bottom of her suitcase. She retrieved a change of clothes from her bag, discarding the ones that had been splattered with William's blood, and slipped into a clean dress. Her movements were efficient, practiced, but the knock at the door had unsettled her. Every sound seemed amplified, the rustle of fabric, the hum of the air conditioning, her own breathing. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like a hunter caught in the open. A soft shuffle outside the door made her pause. Whoever was out there hadn't left. She knew she couldn't stay much longer. The risk was too great. Her plan had been to stage the scene more convincingly, to create a narrative of an intruder or a professional hit gone wrong. But now, she didn't have the luxury of time. Felicia grabbed a small vial from her bag and poured its contents onto the bathroom floor, creating a faint trail toward the door. It was an accelerant, one she had intended to use as part of her backup plan. If anyone questioned the scene, the signs would point to a struggle that had escalated tragically. Another knock, sharper this time. "Ma'am, is everything all right? Should I call security?" Felicia bit back a curse. This was spiraling out of her control. She couldn't risk being seen, but she also couldn't afford to look suspicious. Forcing herself to breathe steadily, she opened the bathroom door and glanced in the mirror. Her appearance was calm, composed. Picture of a woman caught off guard late night. Finally, she approached the door, her hand hovering over the handle. After a long, tense pause, she heard footsteps retreating down the hallway. Relief washed over her, but it was fleeting. She had to leave. Now. Felicia slipped her suitcase handle into her grip, casting one final glance at the room. It wasn't the flawless scene she'd envisioned, but it would have to do. She cracked the door open cautiously, peeking down the hallway. Seeing no one, she stepped out, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. As she made her way toward the elevator, her nerves were stretched taut. Every step felt like a gamble, every sound like a potential threat. The walls seemed to close in around her, the luxurious setting suddenly oppressive. When the elevator doors slid shut behind her, she exhaled shakily, her heart pounding in her chest. The game had shifted, but Felicia was nothing if not adaptable. As she descended to the lobby, she straightened her posture and smoothed her features into an expression of calm detachment. By the time she stepped into the cool night air, she was once again the composed and confident woman the world believed her to be. She hailed a cab, her suitcase by her side, and disappeared into the quiet streets of Texas. Inside, her mind raced, recalculating her next move. She had come too far to let this slip away now. The stage had been set, the players positioned, but as Felicia left the scene of her crime, she couldn't shake the faint sense that, despite her careful planning, the unexpected knock at the door might be the first crack in her meticulously crafted plan. As Felicia emerged from the hotel, the cool night air brushed against her skin, a stark contrast to the suffocating tension of the suite she had just left behind. She moved with purpose, her suitcase rolling quietly behind her, each step a calculated part of her escape. The grand entrance of the Lone Star Resort was deserted, save for a single valet, who offered a polite nod as she strode past. Felicia returned the gesture with a faint smile, her expression calm and unassuming. A woman heading out for an early morning departure, nothing more. Inside the suite, she had left behind a carefully curated scene. She had staged the room to appear as though an intruder had broken in, the remnants of a stage struggle scattered artfully around. She'd even cracked the lock on the balcony door to add plausibility to the narrative. The accelerant she had spilled in the bathroom was meant to hint at an unfinished plan by the intruder, a red herring for the investigators who would soon arrive. William's body remained on the bed, pale and still. To anyone who discovered him, it would look like the work of a professional. Cold, calculated, and entirely impersonal. Felicia's gloves, tools, and blood-stained clothes were packed securely in her luggage, destined for disposal far from the scene. As she climbed into the back seat of the cab she'd hailed, she exhaled deeply, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction. The plan, while rushed in its final moments, had been executed successfully. Her mind was already shifting to the next steps, filing for William's assets, playing the grieving widow, and ensuring she inherited everything he had worked his entire life to build. The cab driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Early flight, Mom?" Felicia nodded, offering a polite smile. "Yes, long day ahead." The city lights blurred as the cab sped through the quiet streets, carrying her further from the life she had infiltrated. Her thoughts flickered briefly to William, not as the man who had loved her, but as the opportunity she had seized. To Felicia, he had been a stepping stone, nothing more. But questions lingered in her mind, small uncertainties she had been unable to dismiss. The knock at the door. Had the person outside truly believed her excuses? Had she left any trace behind, something she might have overlooked in her haste? And what about William's friends and family? Would they believe the story she would weave, or would they dig deeper, uncovering the truth beneath her carefully constructed facade? As the cab pulled up to the private terminal where her flight awaited, Felicia stepped out, handing the driver a crisp bill. Her movements were poised, her confidence unwavering, but her mind buzzed with the risks that still lay ahead. She had planned for nearly every contingency, but the human element, the unpredictability of others, was a variable she could never fully control. Felicia boarded the private jet she had arranged weeks earlier, its sleek interior a stark contrast to the chaos she had left behind. Settling into her seat, she allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. The hardest part was over. Now, all that remained was to navigate the aftermath with the same precision and poise that had brought her this far. But what do you think of Felicia's story? Could she have accounted for every detail, or did her rushed exit leave behind clues that would eventually lead to her downfall? Do you believe the knock at the door was a simple mistake, or was someone already suspicious of her actions? But about William's best friend, Michael, and his daughter Charlotte? Will they accept the staged narrative, or will their instincts drive them to uncover the truth? And most importantly, What would justice for William look like in the wake of such a meticulously planned betrayal? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have suspected Felicia from the beginning, or did her calculated charm fool even you? And what should happen next? Will her plan unravel, or will she escape unscathed, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions? Let us know what you think, and let's discuss the twists and turns of this chilling tale together. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support is crucial as it helps us continue to bring you compelling stories filled with betrayal, deceit, and crime, just like the one you've heard today. Stay tuned for more deep dives into complex narratives that reveal the darker sides of human nature and the redemptive power of truth and resilience. Don't miss out on our upcoming episodes. Subscribe now and join us as we explore more intriguing and thought-provoking stories. Thank you for your support.